Guys, I don't know what's going on with AP Classroom, but for some reason, every time I try to log in to see your quiz and stuff like that, this is all I get. So I haven't been able to look at your quiz. And so I don't know if you guys can access AP Classroom or if it's just my problem. But I haven't received any email from the college board, but it's the weekend in the States, so I don't think I'll be able to get it until sometime this week. And your FRQ, Unit 2 FRQ is due tomorrow. And your Unit 3 FRQ is actually the longest. This has the most questions from the booklet. And I know it will be an intense week this week because you have a daily number 6s, and also you have this. For now, I have it due till next Sunday or Monday. I think next Sunday, but I might postpone the due date for this, especially if I still have a problem with the AP Classroom, and since I'm requiring you guys to also grade. If I can't post the answer key, obviously you can't do your homework, but that doesn't mean that you should wait until I post the answer key or wait until the due date, just in the hope of maybe postponing the due date. I still want you guys to be on top of everything, so it's not too overwhelming. And so Zane's question is yes, that will be daily. So for this week there is a daily, and then there's Unit 3. So if you think of it as doing maybe FRQ 3 per day, then it would be a good pacing. I think if you only do 1 a day, or if you do like 6 in 1 day, this might be a little overwhelming. And so my suggestion is to do 3, 1 FRQ 6, that's the daily assignment, and 2 FRQ, that's the shorter one, or it should be a shorter one. Or if you want to work through the weekend, obviously you can do a little more Unit 3 FRQs during the weekend, but I would suggest that you take about the same amount of time each day, so it's not too overwhelming, and also you can get a habit of timing yourself when you do FRQ, because your test is timed, and so it's very important to have a good sense of how much time you're taking when you're doing each FRQs. All right, so I don't really have answers because I don't know what's going on with my AP Classroom. So your grades are a little bit, your grades haven't been put into RedMap or anything like that. So I'm sorry about that you don't get my feedback, even though I think because this is an AP class and this is, you have the answer key from the AP Classroom or just from the review keys and number 6 answers and stuff like that. I trust that you are actually reading the answer keys and see how you're doing. And so hopefully that will be enough feedback, but I wish you can also see it on RedMap as a grade and things like that. So yeah, I'm sorry that's not being done in a timely manner. Again, I wouldn't really know how you feel about the workload or anything like that unless you tell me. So if you are really struggling, despite your effort to be on top of everything, please email me and be in a communication with me, because it's a guessing game for me if you don't say anything. And that's the worst part of this whole online school for me. The fact that I don't have any feedback from either you guys is like faces or verbal or anything like that. All right, so today's devotional has a title, Comforters. So I'll start reading, and hopefully this comforts you as well. Early in our journey with hope, I believed that I'd have to give people a lot of grace. thinking that many people would say the wrong thing. But really, I can count on one hand the comments that I could have gone without. The first came from a woman who started into a long sermon that I don't remember much of, except that it included the statement that this was for the best. To tell you the truth, I wanted to tell her to shut up. Then there was the girl who talked with David. It seems as if people have a natural tendency to want us to know they can relate to our pain, and usually that is a good thing. That's what she was trying to do. At that point, we fed Hope with a tube we threaded down her throat so the formula went right into her tummy. The girl said, "This may sound trivial, but recently my cat was really sick and I had to feed her with a tube. So I kind of know what you're going through." It was all my husband could do to keep from saying, "You know what? That does sound trivial." I'm not sure why, but we have this tendency to want to compare pain. This is harder than that. This is easier than that. I think I'm figuring out that you really can't compare pain. It all just hurts. But to tell you the truth, it hasn't been what people have said, but what they haven't said that has been the most difficult thing to deal with. 2 weeks before Hope died, I was talking to a woman whose child had died from a heart defect at 9 months of age. She told me that the hardest thing for her was when people didn't say anything after her son died. She said, "I wanted to tell them, how could you add to my pain by ignoring it?" My husband discovered exactly how she felt when he went into the office for the first time after Hope's death. He had a meeting with someone from outside the company, someone who should have known and probably did know Hope had died. He came into my husband's office talking to Mile a minute, but said nothing about our loss. It was the first of many times we experienced the pain of words not spoken. I've tried not to judge too harshly because I know I've done the same thing. I know there have been times I've avoided people who are hurting, afraid to bring it up, or afraid I would say the wrong thing. Mostly, I just wanted to avoid the awkwardness. I hope I never do that again, but I'm sure I've done it more times than I would like to admit. I can think of many times when I finally got to the store and bought the perfect card which, unsent, slowly became dog-eared on my dresser. As time went by, I didn't send it because I was embarrassed that it had taken so long. I guess I was hoping that the person who was hurting wouldn't notice that he or she hadn't heard from me. But now I've learned that every person's effort, no matter how small, no matter how much time has passed, to acknowledge my loss is significant and remembered. Most who have been courageous and kind enough to express their sorrow for us have done so beautifully, even if all they could say was, "I don't really know what to say." Throughout the story of Job, we read that he not only has to deal with his suffering, but also with the response of all his friends who, in many ways, add to his suffering. Job's friends point fingers, pontificate, probe. But you know what? I think they were doing the best they could. At the beginning, we see that they came to him and wept and mourned with him in silence. But then they made their first mistake. They started talking. And they didn't know what they were talking about. Job chapter 4, verse 1 through 2. Then Eliphaz the Temanite replied to Job, "Will you be patient and let me say a word? For who could keep from speaking out?" When we are plunged into difficult situations, part of the difficulty is dealing with those around us, some of whom try to explain God without knowing what they're talking about. Sound familiar? I like the way Eugene Peterson paraphrased Job's response to his outspoken friends. He says, "I've had all I can take of your talk. What a bunch of miserable comforters." Far from having a miserable bunch of comforters, I was blessed with many people who not only knew what to say, but also showed they cared in all kinds of creative ways. There was Joanna, who worked to get just the right floral arrangement for Hope's casket. Her plan was to make a wreath out of it for me. But in the days following the service, I found that watching the flowers dry and decay became a painful picture of what was happening to Hope's body in the grave. So I called her, and she came over and got rid of all the fading flowers in the house. Our friend Jan took us on a river cruise on her fancy boat, and we called the day Hope Floats. Lori let me talk and let me cry. She held me as I cried after I took Hope's car seat out of the car for the last time. Mary Grace set up a schedule for people to come to our house to help with household tasks or simply to sit and rock Hope. Mary Bess organized meals for us throughout Hope's entire life and in the months following her death. Sue taught the Bible study from which I learned so much that carried me through the crisis. My friend Angela listened to me vent the pain of my deepest regrets. Marty came when I called her in the middle of the night because Hope wouldn't stop crying. She came when I called her in the middle of the night to tell her Hope was gone. Marty came when I just didn't have the strength to clean out Hope's room by myself. These are just a few of the friends who were there for me. But I wouldn't be truthful if I didn't tell you that I also have friends who disappeared. Friends who were too busy and didn't seem to, or perhaps didn't know how to, care. I have had to ask God to work in me to forgive them and to accept their limitations. I wonder how Job was able to get past all the accusations his friends sent his way. It must have helped that God expressed his own anger. This is Job chapter 42. After the Lord had finished speaking to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, "I'm angry with you and with your two friends, for you have not been right in what you said about me, as my servant Job was. Now take 7 young bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and offer a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer on your behalf. I will not treat you as you deserve, for you have not been right in what you said about me, as my servant Job was." So Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite did as the Lord commanded them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. When Job prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes. In fact, the Lord gave him twice as much as before. I look at Job's example, and I see that he prays for his friends and that the Lord accepted Job's prayer. I find it somewhat curious that God's instructions to Job are to pray for his friends until I realize how difficult it is for me to be unforgiving toward someone I'm praying for. I wonder if that is why God gave Job those instructions. If you and I want to be free of the bitterness that estranges us from others and eats away at our own struggle to find joy again, we're going to have to forgive and pray for the friends who have let us down. They might not deserve it. In fact, they probably don't. But then we don't forgive people because they deserve it. We forgive them because we've been forgiven so much by God and because we want to keep in close relationship with God. And the benefit is that through forgiving, we are set free. When we are able to accept what others have to offer in our times of sorrow, as well as their limitations, we are no longer bound by our expectations or embittered by disappointment in others. Have you been surrounded by a bunch of miserable comforters on your pathway of suffering? Would you be willing to begin to pray for them so that God might free you from the unforgiveness that has you tied in knots? Would you extend grace to those who say the wrong thing or nothing at all? Would you learn from the mistakes as well as the examples of others so that you will become the kind of comforter who softens the pain of others? And I want you to meditate on 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 4 through 7. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.